Good afternoon to everybody. This is Stefano, Masrange Politics from Italy. Today we have a special guest. Actually, it's in Abu Dhabi. I will present her very fastly. The description you can find in the video, also in the chat. Zaynab El Bernoussi is a scholar of dignity politics, international relationship, international relations, and international political economy. And research interest focus on politicization of dignity in the bands in the political development in Global South, bioethical issues, and South-South cooperation. Her first book, Dignity in the Egyptian Revolution, was published by Cambridge University Press in 2021, so it's very, let's say, new. I will put all the links also about the book in the description. For me, it was an honor to have her in our panel because she is an expert in a topic that it's not usual. So it was very interesting for me to give to the public also her point of view about this argument. Today, the topic is about the halal economy. So I will not take any more time. I will give the word to Zaynab, and if you have any question, I will stay in the background and I will collect all the questions for her. So if you have any curiosity or whatever about halal economy, don't be shy and put it in the chat. Zaynab, the stand is yours.
Okay, well, very happy to be here, and thank you very much, Stefano, for having me for this kind introduction. I was very happy to hear about you and witness your impressive energy, juggling so many things. So this podcast, your work as an elected local representative, and your work as an entrepreneur and innovator in the field of advancing cleaner economy. So that's really, very impressive. As you said today, I have a huge task that is to talk about the halal economy, but given the limits of my knowledge and the constraint of time, I'm going to talk about a few foundational ideas about the so-called halal economy, and then I'll talk about my research on the growth of the halal and how it's implicating more the global south and south-south cooperation. So notably the Middle East, North Africa, because of course, a big Muslim population, and China, a big global economic player, as those locations are, as I said, places with significant Muslim populations, and these populations are also growing. So it's very interesting to sort of observe. So in this first part of talking about the foundations of what is halal and the halal economy, I'm going to pose three questions. So first, what is the halal economy? Second, is it the same as the economy of the Prophet in Islam, Muhammad, peace be upon him? And lastly, third question, what are some of the principles of the halal economy? So first question, what is the halal economy? And here just basics. Well, obviously we are talking about an economy that is Sharia, which means Islamic law. So that is Islamic law abiding, all right? Second question is the halal economy the same as the economy of the early time of Islam and the time of the Prophet? The answer is not really, meaning that actually this idea of the halal economy is more of a modern thing of also our times. And this is also a definition that of the halal economy that we are using today. If we actually go back to what we can identify as the start of the halal economy with the start of Islam, so over 14 centuries ago, well, it was not really perceived as a halal economy back then, because it was just doing business, buying and selling stuff as usual, even in exchanging money. And yes, there was money back then. And at the time, it is worth noting that some of the money exchange in the time of the Prophet was Roman coins. So little wink to our Italian friends here. And even if the halal economy did not really exist at the time of the Prophet as it is today, the time of the Prophet was, of course, key to the project of Islam because he established many rules, right? So there are all these rules, which then became part of what is called Sunnah, or the way of the Prophet. So that became regulation on ethics of trade and ethics of social relations. Now the third question, what are some of the principles of the halal economy? Well, here let me say that practicing Muslims ought to consume halal, right? So this is part of what it means to be a practicing Muslim, to be part of the halal economy, meaning meat slaughtered, not dead, and slaughtered by Muslims, where the killed animal is drained of blood to avoid contamination of meat. And I'm going to say etc., because there are interpretations of Islamic practices that can add further requirements to what makes something halal. So there are even degrees of halal, right? Something really halal, right? Then you have clothing, right? And overall, it's about modesty. So this is halal clothing, right? There is halal drinking. Overall, no alcohol. Then how you deal with capital, right? Finance. And probably, and broadly, it's about being risk averse, right? So no risk, no interest, and favoring, so interest rates, and favoring being productive with capital rather than leaving it idle or just speculating without being involved in the productive way. So these are basics of a so-called halal economy, but the halal today has also evolved even further. So it includes now tourism, cosmetics, beauty, and entertainment and technology. And I mean, there are attempts to go even further than that. In Islam, there are also three broad categories to gauge where you stand on the Islamic abiding consumption, right? So what is halal consumption? Halal is in the spectrum, what is the best, what is totally abiding by Islamic law. Then you have pretty much in the middle, makruh, meaning that there is not really no consensus on whether it's really halal or not, right? So some say it's okay, some say it's not. For instance, smoking is considered makruh. And then on the other extreme, you have haram, and which is clearly in violation of Islamic principles. With Islamic markets, there are a number of rules. So the rule of limiting gharar, or limiting risk-taking. So this is an important rule. There is also the rule of promoting justice, adl, seeking balance as a third corner, hedging against shak, so hedging against doubt. And this is part of also a further understanding of risk, specifically regarding doubt. Upholding necessity, so doing things only when they are out of necessity, so no excess. And emphasizing khilafa, so meaning humans' deputy role on earth. And this actually shows a strong ecological ethos in Islam. So it's about moderation, right? Including living in symbiosis, right, with one's environments. And these are key and can be considered foundation of what is even now motivating the halal economy in its normative model, right? These foundations also promote equity and justice and support a more sustainable economic system. So there is also this growing attention to how this could be matching to the needs now of limited resources. Today, the halal economy is surprisingly bigger in non-Muslim majority contexts. So one of the biggest halal ports is in the Netherlands, Rotterdam. The biggest halal meat production country is Brazil. And now also Australia is becoming quite big. And some of the more established institutions of Islamic banking or Islamic finance are in the UK. The US is also becoming a huge halal market. One can now even find their halal drive-bys. So these quick certifying bodies that facilitate the process of labeling. There is also the recent growth of green zabiha in the US, which is meat that is both halal and organic. So in many parts of the United States, one can have a halal Thanksgiving turkey that is green zabiha and tayyib, meaning that it's slaughtered in a way that is, of course, compliant, but that actually the animal had a good life, right? So this is also part of a sort of a further evolution of the meaning of halal. These examples show that the vibrant consumerist nature of the American markets has pushed and even has pushed for even more development in the halal business. And there is even now growth of halal veganism, despite the pressure to eat meat in Eid celebrations. So this is part of the practice. And that is now interpreted as a way to fulfill more the principles of justice and balance, right? Because now resources are more limited, right? Now let's move to the second part of this presentation, in which I want to talk about my research on the growth of halal and the China and the China-MENA relations and opportunity to cooperate further. So I have my work is on dignity politics, but I also work on sort of growth of South-South cooperation, because to me that represents also this growing, there a growing language of dignity politics. And I have a chapter on this, so I'm going to be basing here my talk on a chapter that came last year with Brill in the book Rethinking Halal, so for those interested. And now I'm further researching the topic by looking at more recent developments. So some of the recent developments. In 2021, the more recent data on the halal economy show that the total size of the economy was just a few $1 billion short of reaching 2 trillion US dollars. So it's really big and expected to almost double in volume by 2027. So really soon. The halal economy is also growing fast, and China's involvement in it is notable. So that's, I think, is really interesting to observe. Of course, this is because of China's growing power as both a growing political influencer, but also, of course, as probably the major economic power. My key concern in my research is how is China's halal business growth impacting its relation with the MENA region, and what are the greater implications for South-South cooperation in the global political economy and for maybe a change in the international order. So compared to the big players in the halal that I mentioned, Brazil, US, UK, China's involvement in the halal remains actually quite limited. It represents only 1% of global halal trade. But in 2020, the top world exporters of halal foods have been sort of giving away bits to the growing role of China. So this is Brazil, India, that are also increasingly growing, cooperating with China. And what's interesting about the Chinese share is that it's more diversified. including food, finance, tourism, media, recreation, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals. And pharmaceuticals is also very interesting to observe given the growing health diplomacy that China has been conducting since actually the 70s. But that obviously was very, very clear during the pandemic with the Chinese vaccines. Most halal consumers, so consumers are found in the MENA. So this is why the MENA is interesting, for instance, for the aspiration of the Chinese in growing their halal share. But there are also an estimated 500 million, so 500 million, non-Muslim consumers of halal in the world. So it's not only the MENA, obviously. For example, halal restaurants in Hong Kong and Beijing are popular choices among non-Muslim consumers, especially because of their reputation for hygiene and cleanliness. Despite the limitations on its current role, China wants to grow its place as a halal actor. In 2014, the Hong Kong-based financial group Mega Capital International has become a central halal certification provider in the Chinese Belt Road Initiative, the BRI, and it has been collaborating with JAKIM, so Malaysia's Department of Islamic Development responsible for issuing halal certification, and also a very, very trusted label of halal by consumers worldwide. So Malaysia is really a notable player there. Also, the following year, in 2015, China established a halal industrial park in an interest. So this is a complete industrial zone that is only for halal production. And it was in an interest to brand the country as a halal-friendly market and promote its local halal producers, notably the Chinese dairy company Yili, that's very popular in Asia and that has been growing as an important exporter of halal milk products. The halal opportunity also needs to be understood in the context of the Chinese authorities' policy towards halal goods and services in China itself, particularly in relation to the troubled relationship with the Uyghur community of the Xinjiang province, which has triggered a significant condemnation. So China here has a double opportunity to both improve its image regarding how it treats the Uyghur community by providing for a Muslim-friendly community, right, both locally but also internationally through trade, but also by tapping into the huge business opportunity of getting a share of the growing pie that is the halal economy. The halal opportunity also supports the Chinese authorities' interest in partnership with Muslim majority countries. So, of course, in the MENA, but also in Southeast Asia. The importance of this economy has a particular regional resonance for China, as many of its neighbors are also growing halal markets. So I notably mentioned Indonesia and Malaysia. So just today, there was the 4th International Halal Dialogue held in Jakarta. During this meeting, one of the key themes was encouraging free halal certification to help small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs. And that was really interesting to do because that tackles criticism that the halal business is just driven by money and not ethics, right? And again, so I mentioned the importance of Indonesia. So you had today this important meeting, and you had this important commitment to be to bring in more actors, even small and medium-sized companies. But Indonesia also, very interestingly, recently passed a law that everything entering its markets must be halal certified. And a number of sort of strong halal markets are also sort of thinking to follow suit, right? For instance, ASEAN, so of course this is an organization where Indonesia is also an important actor. So ASEAN adopted the halal regional framework. And it was also very interesting that both these changes in laws regarding the halal certification, the halal label, happened during the pandemic. And actually that there was a noticeable growth of the halal economy during the pandemic. So I think maybe I can just go quickly to the conclusion, because maybe in the interest of time.
We received already a lot of questions for you, so
Okay.
be prepared.
Okay. So should I go for more, or should I?
It's up to you. It's if you want to say something, but at the end, I already collected the question for you. So
okay, all right.
you have
So
all the time that you want.
okay, so I mean, so I wanted to talk a bit more about my research in terms of also looking at a history of cooperation between the MENA and China, even before now this phenomenon of the halal economy. So there is also this opportunity to sort of reuse, right, that background of relationship that goes back to the non-alignment. And that was also something that an argument that I was going to bring to what I said regarding maybe here further South-South cooperation that can have an impact on both global governance, but also in terms of thinking about the international order. Yeah, I think I can, and maybe just a last point to conclude. So I think that what is really interesting here is that with the halal economy and its growth is that we have the involvement of many Muslim majority countries that happen to be in the global south. So in its nature, it very much puts the global south in a center stage. But it's also a model that has an interesting approach in terms of promoting more ethical, more balanced model of consumption that can be quite helpful in these times of struggle in terms of the scarcity of resources. So I'll stop here.
Okay, perfect. So first question I collected in advance from our speaker. It is Marocina. She's an Italo-Moroccan girl that actually is in China. This is why Marocina, because it's
all right.
So and she sent to me this question in advance for you. How does modern finance and these tools reconcile with financial practices in Muslim countries? Giving this word not be proper and appropriate in the Islamic social economic system?
All right. Well, hello, Morotina, and thank you for the question, and I think it's also very interesting to be at this time with your background in China. So I hope, it's going well for you. So, if modern finance can reconcile with Muslim finance, absolutely, yes. So I mean, there are adjustments that make it appropriate for a so-called Islamic social economic system, as you say. So what we have in modern finance are a number of tools, right, that are provided to consumers. So you have provisions of loans, deposits, and forms of investments, right? So these are maybe broadly the three main things, and I'm missing more. And you have that also provided in Islamic finance, right? But what you have is slight changes in terms of trying to make maybe some of these practices more responsible, in the sense that there is, again, this stronger ethos, so the interest in ethics and risk splitting, so that risks are split between both the bank and the consumer, which we see less in sort of commercial non-Islamic finance, right, where you see most of the actual cost, right, of the risk being transferred to the consumer, right? So you can have loans, right? So you can borrow money from a bank and it can still be Islamic, right? But it will be costlier, right, than what you will find in other banks, right? It will be costlier both to you, the consumer, and this is what's happened, is that actually Islamic banks tend to have higher fees. So it is costlier, but it actually turns out to also be costlier to the bank.
So it's like a sort of shared responsibility between the two parts, between the shareholders. Okay.
Yeah. So you share profits, but you also share losses. So the bank has more at stake. You can actually invest, right? You can invest, but remember the principle that this is you shouldn't just speculate your money, right? Because it would be like gambling, and gambling is haram, so it's not okay. So you should be more involved, right? So, and there are ways. So sometimes we can actually question how much it's really doing enough. So some of these institutions, and actually some think maybe the way you asked your question, that it's not appropriate what they're doing, and some say that they are trying. But actually most Islamic banks really want to sort of try to provide all the services or most of the services that you can find in a normal bank.
So, perfect. Next question. How is marketing conducted within Halal economy? Halal reminds me very much of a vegan, sustainable agriculture and other environmental friendly labels. Is it there any similarity in the way those two marketed to the customer, to the consumer? Like so. And this subscriber is from Kabardino-Balkaria, that is like Caucasus. It's a very Muslim zone of Russia.
Okay, all right. Well, hello, and thank you for your question. So, so how marketing is conducted? Well, I mean, yes, there is marketing. So of halal products. So I mean, and it's also because the labels are actually quite, I mean, they are costly, and so for instance, I mentioned the certifying body in Malaysia, JAKIM, that's very famous and a very sort of well-respected label, and this is a governmental institution doing that. So there is also this sort of prestige of the fact that it's governmental, but still, since I mean, you both the label in itself almost does the marketing, but of course the firms that get these labels want to market their products. And it is targeting a Muslim population, those consumers that are Muslim practicing, but not only, because I think, as you said, it is associated with, so halal is increasingly now associated with food that is traced, right? We know where everything is coming from, right? So we trust, right? That it's maybe also because of there is an interpretation that is about good treatment of the animals, right? That this is then also environmental friendly, that it's then sort of part of that ecological crowd, right? And yes, I think a number of these firms sort of play on those similarities, right, between the halal label and its strictly Islamic sense, but also in how it can be desired by non-Muslim consumers who also seek some of those principles, but for them it's not necessarily associated with Islam. So I think so. It's also sometimes, for instance, about in the case of tourism, right? So you would have separation of gender, right? And for some, this is also desirable because maybe for some they feel safer, right? That to be in places where it's sort of segregated in that sense. So particularly for women, right? When it's women's only. So there are taxis that are women's only and that are considered halal.
Can I put to the same question another user said a little bit like in Canada I often question if it's actually halal because I felt sometimes it's just a label. Is there a black market of fake halal in the West, in your opinion?
Fake halal in the West, I've been recently in touch with a number of certifying bodies in Europe. So there is, for instance, the Instituto Halal in Spain. That's actually a fantastic organization, growing, doing training, and that has really, I think, quite impressive means in terms of scholars that help in terms of the Islamic law compliance, but also means in terms of laboratories, right, to detect different traceabilities needed for the halal label, right? So whether it's pork-free or other here markers, right, for halal. And I think it's usually so. Even for instance, for Muslim countries, European labels of halal are quite prestigious, and I can say that also from my talks with meetings with a number of colleagues of halal bodies in Morocco, right? So this is where I'm from. Even actually here in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi. So I think the halal label in the West is pretty usually respected because also there are EU standards, right, that are associated with here the different levels of monitoring of the production. But actually, so maybe this could be something to ponder about. What was interesting in my research is to find that there is more fake or perception of fake halal regarding Chinese halal. And it's both, it has its disconnection with the Uyghur community, that it was sort of also part of a unfriendliness to this community, that there was this sort of lack of rigor in the halal certificate, right, or the halal label, but also because maybe it's also associated with maybe perception that there is less regulation of maybe some Chinese products. Yes, and I think that there is this sensitivity to that.
Another that is very short, but I collected before. It's connected also to my local economy. I will explain why to the users. Like, how can the halal economy be integrated in the states with strong Muslim immigration? Can it create friction with the traditional economy? How? Why I ask it to you? Like my province, it's Brescia. It's one of the most industrialized in Europe, not in Italy. So we have a huge Muslim community, because like the biggest, we have a big community from Morocco, a big community from Albania, for example. The first group now, it's Romania, so it's like a Christian group and Muslim groups, and there is a huge amount of halal shops and whatever. Do you think that, in my opinion, like in the Italian market, the most of the consumers of the halal shops are like let's say immigrants, but especially for the butchers. But for the other shops, no. It's like there is like mixed type. It's not necessary, as you said, to be Muslim to buy in an halal shop, because maybe it's more convenient, it's small, it's next to your condo or whatever. And so do you think that could be integrated without any problems in let's say a state with a strong traditional economy, or no?
Well, I think it's already happening, because I mean, what you said, it's a number of these communities, since there are halal butchers, right? So it's already sort of integrating, and I think it's maybe part of the growth of economies and particularly of consumerism in providing choices, right? So it's another choice, as we can maybe also have, vegan food, right? I can't remember the so if you have some allergies, right? So and you have
gluten free.
Exactly, that was the word. Yes, it was exactly the one I was looking for. So yes, these
I read your mind.
Okay, but actually, of course, that's yes. So I think it can be integrated. But the second part of the question, frictions. So there will be frictions, and there are frictions. I assume, because I think sometimes, well, for instance, for those growing immigrant communities with maybe demands of Muslim consumption, when they don't find it, well, this can be a friction, right? Because they might be demanding more, that it becomes more available. And for non-Muslim consumers, maybe it's taken away, right, from their space for other and for sort of non-halal food. And actually, in the book that I was mentioning, Rethinking Halal, published by Brill last year, we have one chapter on the case of Britain. And Britain has also a big Muslim community from immigrants. And you have there Birmingham, right, which is also very much known for being a very interesting sort of also growing halal economy. And there are these friction, because sometimes what happened was that there was meat that was halal, and so it was imported, and all of the meat was imported halal, but some consumers did not want to consume halal. So they took away the halal label, but then they were consuming halal and not knowing, so which is also problematic.
No, but it's interesting, very interesting for me, because I think that in some way, probably like the Christian community lost this, let's say, principle that there is also in the Bible, a little bit similar. But when I was in Panama, I'm there for work. I will be in December also. There was a huge surprise for me, because there is a huge Jewish community, and there is a huge kosher supermarket. And in a some sort of way. It's very similar, like the rules of what you find, what you don't find. And it was interesting for me also for the wine, like the certification of the kosher or wine or whatever. So another information about its question is what is the attitude of Halal about modified crops and animal products, about genetically modification and whatever.
Yeah.
If there is any rules that you can or cannot. Or if you read the question, it's like about animal grow internal organs like earth waves for human transplantation.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. Thank you. So the second part, this is the field of bioethics. And actually, I'm very interested in that. And I have a few publications on the topic, Islamic bioethics. So actually, Islamic bioethics, here there are several interpretations. So some are what we call creationists, right? So it's you don't touch creation, right? So meaning that any organ change intervention, right, is seen as problematic. But then there are interpretations that even actually allow for abortion, right, and that are that actually see that's. So in this interpretation, there is an interest of the child in not being born, right? So it's sort of really different from let's say what creationists would say, right? So it's really a spectrum there. But usually, I think that there is also a strong interest in a principle in Islam that is called ijtihad. So it's sort of progress, right? And so ijtihad, not jihad, right? And ijtihad is sort of here intellectual progress. So actually, for medicine, ways of maybe helping the community, right? Maybe through here developments in medical technology can be seen as favorable. So, for instance, there is even actually a fatwa, so here a way of legitimizing gender surgery, right, as seen as okay, right? So that's in Islamic context. So now for the other part of the question on
so gender surgery, it could be accepted.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And regarding gender-modified organisms and animal cruelty, so animal cruelty usually that is very problematic, right? So this is part of also a very basic understanding of halal meat, right? That it's treating well the animal. So that's also the well-being of the animal is also, I think, if there is a way, if using some maybe substances that can alter that, so then that is not compliant, right, with halal. For genetically modified, so here plants, I think yes, that too, because. So remember when I said the principles, a very, very key principles is khilafa, right? That actually there is this mandate of, so let me just see the exact translation, deputy role of humans, right, in the planet, that there is a role of maintaining, right, the planet and letting it for, so the khilafa, meaning that it's you have to preserve it for the next generations, right?
It's and like actually, an equilibrium of the planet. Okay.
Yeah. So then it's definitely problematic. Yeah.
Okay, let me put this one very fastly, but if you can, and then I have the last two questions. If you can explain what is the Halal certification practically, and if it's something that is popular now.
Yeah. So the Halal certification, it depends on the certifying body. So you have these HCBs, the Halal certification bodies. So I'm going to talk about the one that I'm more familiar with, and it's the one called Imanor of Morocco. But everyone has sort of a cycle, right? And it depends on which product is to be certified, right? So if it's meat, then it is about sort of an evaluation of how the animal, where the animal comes from, and then how the meat is produced. So this includes, of course, the slaughtering, right? And of course, no contact with pork and no pork, right? So this is here, for instance, a certification of meat. Then if another interesting one is tourism, hotels, right? So you can get a label for that. So this is you're certifying something very different. And it is about, well, is there a place for prayer, right? Is there, in the room, can we see where the direction of Mecca is? Because this is important for the prayer, right? Do we have rooms that allow separation, right? If women want to not be seen and sit separately from men, right? Things like that. Yeah, so if it's popular, yes, it is getting very popular. So I mentioned the growth of the economy. It's growing at a really, really fast pace. So it's already almost $2 trillion, the global size. And now there is increasing expectation to see the label, right? So it's not enough that I come to you and I say, this is halal, right? You want to see that it has the label to trust it, right? So this is why it is becoming popular, because things were, as I said, even in earlier times, I mean, they were sort of, yes, halal, but now we want to see the label, right? So just to trust it for consumers, whatever they are. Yeah, and it's also changing because there is now more and more regulation. So you have a number of countries that now require that imports are halal, right? So this is why it's also becoming popular.
Okay, this one, let's say, probably the last or the last of the last. Okay, what is the relationship between halal economy and the debt forgiveness? Is there anywhere a practice like on a significant scale, like some Muslim government or banks?
Very, very interesting inquiry here. No clear relationship to my knowledge, because I mean, these are separate things. But I think I see here that there is a good point in terms of trying to see that there is this strong emphasis on ethics, right, in the halal economy. And this is something that is in line also with maybe what we expect in terms of maybe some practices, including debt forgiveness. Yeah, I mean, I can't really answer.
Let me put another one. So this one, like if what is the Islamic microfinance and if it's connected to halal economy?
Well, Islamic finance, right, in its different forms, is part of the halal economy. So this is one of the components. Microfinance So here, I mean, I'm not really familiar with Islamic microfinance specifically termed this way. I mean, I think we talk more generally about Islamic banking finance.
Let's say that microfinance, it's you can call it when there is like a very,
Yes.
very, very like
Small.
small loans that it's more connected like to the growing countries. If you go to the
Yeah.
bank and ask 200 euro, they will not give it to
Yeah.
you. So it's
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. I mean, I again in I'm gonna talk about the case of Morocco because that's where I've done more of my research and that I'm more familiar with that context. But we have microfinance institutions, right? And as you said, Stefano, it's connected to developing countries, right? So we have poverty, and it is a way to give access to funds to people with very, very limited means, right? But this is a practice that has nothing to do with Islam. So it's not called Islamic microfinance in Morocco. It's just called microfinance, but it has very, very high fees. And it's also, I mean, it creates a very big risk, right, for these people because they grow debt, right? They become indebted. So sometimes it's not really, really helpful. So I can see how it can maybe help in some cases, but I also have seen a lot of data and experiences on how it can be not helpful at all. And I think in that sense of really the high the high risk that it creates and how most of its cost is transferred to the consumer. So I don't think it really aligns with Islamic finance in that sense. So I think maybe there could be an institution that if they call themselves Islamic microfinance, but I think based on the principles of and a halal economy, it's not really it wouldn't be very much trusted, right, as really an Islamic financial institution.
let me put the last question and then okay, this is because I was very interested in your speech and curiosity it's about what is in your opinion like the national market with the greatest growth in the halal economy now, because if I interpret it correctly your researches, it seems that it's more not Muslim countries with the biggest growth, like as you said, Netherlands for logistics or whatever. So in your opinion, where is like the region or the national market that could be with the biggest growth of this type of economy?
Okay. Well, so I'll give two. First, to me, the most interesting one in terms of leading the way in the label of halal. That is what I'm interested in. Is Indonesia. So it's changing very rapidly in terms of really making clear laws regarding the halal, right? So as I previously mentioned, there is a lot of sort of ambiguity about, you know, sometimes what is that spectrum of what is halal, haram, what is in between, what is it exactly? And I think they're sort of really tying down everything. They're making it more clear, and setting limits that I think make them really interesting case. They are very much growing because they're also leading the way in terms of almost innovating the halal label in making it something that could be in everything, right? So not only the sort of basic things that we consume. And the second one that's non Muslim countries is the US. So the US, because of course it's a huge economy still, and it is also historically a very interesting place because of Muslim communities that are also connected to civil rights, the civil rights movement, so particularly Black Islam in the US. So I think it's really interesting also to see there how it's growing, and it's also very significant.
Perfect. So thank you so much for your speech, because it was the first time in weeks that we didn't talk about war. So it's good. So thank you so much for your time. I received a lot of other questions, so the people were very interested, but we stayed in 1 hour as we are trying to do in all the speech. So thanks a lot for the speech, and I hope that we can manage to have you in our geopolitical school. We will talk about it in the next week. So to all the people that watch the video, please put the like if you like our content, subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next streams.
Thank
Ciao.
you. Bye. Ciao.